This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Cheating girlfriend became obsessed with me after I broke up with her. And this is a story about a young woman. She's been with her boyfriend for like 4 years. They've been getting along great. They both have great careers. And then one week she goes off on a business trip, and let's just say she gets carried away with one of her coworkers. And guess what? Her boyfriend ends up finding out. So in this story, we're going to see how he handled the situation once he did find out. So let's get into it. And her boyfriend starts out and he says, "I came here to post my story to help clear my head and to figure out my next steps. In summary, my girlfriend of nearly 4 years had a one-night stand with a guy while on a business trip. I was made aware of this through a yet unknown source and broke up with her that same day. Ever since then, she has been stalking my every move, and I have to admit I'm getting a little concerned for my safety. We are both in our late 20s and were introduced through a mutual friend. We clicked and started dating after exchanging texts and talking a few times on the phone. We shared many of the same interests, and there was instant chemistry between us. We dated casually for a little over 2 months before we both realized we were in love and officially declared ourselves a couple. Now, mister, let me just tell you something. You were not in love. You were in lust after 2 months. There's no way you were in love. She works for a national company whose name everyone would recognize, and I work as a double E engineer for a company that produces manufacturing equipment. I'm purposely not giving specifics to maintain our privacy. We both earn good incomes and have great benefits. Even though we had been a couple for so long, we chose to live separately. Now that is smart. You're going to find out here they were not engaged. They were just talking about getting married someday potentially. So unless you are engaged and you're getting close to the wedding, I don't think it's a good idea for couples to be living together. This was due to our offices being located on opposite sides of the city. Her apartment is about 10 minutes from her office, and my place is in the same development as my office. It's so close that I normally walk or bike to work and go home for lunch every day. While our apartments are miles apart, the drive takes less than 30 minutes during non-rush hour traffic. This enables us to spend a lot of time together even during the week. On the weekends, she's either at my place or I'm at hers. Our respective families loved us, and we were on an eventual track to holy matrimony. If this all sounds good, it was, until suddenly it wasn't. I still can't believe what happened and how the deepest, most loving relationship of my life came to an abrupt end. Late last month, my ex and a group of employees from her office went to Dallas for an industry trade show. She attended events like this a few times a year and had been to this one before, so this was nothing out of the ordinary. While she was away like this, she'd always call me every night and we'd talk until it was time to turn in. On this trip, she did the same except on the final night. On that night, all the employees went out to dinner at a nice restaurant. Nothing eventful happened at the dinner. However, after dinner, the festivities carried over and they all went out for drinks on their own dime. She called me as she was walking to the bar, and we talked for nearly 20 minutes until she joined her coworkers at the establishment. I told her to have fun and I'd talk to her tomorrow. To make a long story short, my ex ended up in a hotel room with a guy that night and gave him a blank. And you all know what that blank is. They may have gotten away with it. However, the guy foolishly recorded the act on his cell phone, and the video was sent to me anonymously 2 weeks later. I'm not going to go into all the particulars of how this mystery person got the video to me, but just know they did, and without a trace. That evening, I drove to my girlfriend's apartment as we had planned. But instead of going there to enjoy dinner and a romantic evening, I confronted her with the video. Her reaction was not what I expected. When I played the video, she just watched without saying anything, with her eyes glaring at the screen. After about a minute, I stopped the video and asked her if she had anything to say. Without looking at me, she just solemnly shook her head no, while staring forward. With that, I got up and walked calmly out the door. Before leaving, I looked back and she was still sitting emotionless in the same position. There were no tears, no eye contact, no words spoken, and no attempt to stop me from leaving. It was like when she saw the video, she became totally zoned out. So the reason why she zoned out is because you caught her flat-footed. You surprised her with that video, she wasn't expecting it, and she didn't have an excuse for you, so instead of saying something, she just froze in her track. As I made the drive back to my place, I felt eerily calm, replaying in my mind what just happened. Like I said, it was surreal, like this was a dream that I'd eventually wake up from. I actually slapped my face and pinched my arms a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I went home, had a light meal, and sat out on my balcony sipping a bourbon, reliving the past 4 years. Well, I'm glad he's sipping the bourbon instead of downing the bourbon. At around 10, I got a call from my ex's mother asking if I had seen her. I told her yes, advising I had been with her earlier in the evening. Her mother sounded relieved as she told me she had been trying to reach her, but she wasn't answering. Since she would eventually find out anyway, I decided to inform her mother that we had broken up. Hearing this, she became upset and asked why. I told her out of respect I'd let her daughter explain this to her. Judging by the way she responded, I think she realized her daughter had done something inappropriate as she didn't press me further. She instead told me she was going over to her place and that she'd call me when she got there. I told her that wasn't necessary as we were no longer together. I then thanked her for treating me so well and told her I was going to miss her and her husband. My ex's parents are good people, and I had grown close to them over the past few years. What I said came from the heart, and I got a little choked up. She also became emotional and told me this wasn't goodbye and that we'd talk again soon, but deep inside I knew our relationship would never be the same. While I may appear strong and unfazed by this, I assure you I've had plenty of weak moments since finding out. It's just that I've done all my crying and screaming when I'm home alone or driving in my car. That is very smart. That's where you want to show emotion. You want to work that out when you're by yourself, not in front of people. Throughout it all, I've not missed one day of work and have also managed to keep a regular schedule at the gym. Doing so has helped me stay focused on the future. And again, I gave him a thumbs up for that because that's what you need to do. Keep yourself in shape. Don't drink. Don't go out and party and do things like that to try to drown your sorrows. What you need to do is focus on improving yourself, and it looks like he's doing that. Before anyone asks, let me be clear. There's no way I'd ever stay with someone who has been unfaithful. This has always been something I've felt strongly about, and my girlfriend knew this. That's good because you need to lay that out right up front. If you're going to get into a relationship with someone, you need to have that talk to say, hey, listen, if you ever stray, guess what? Our relationship will end immediately. He says, funny thing is, she told me this was how she felt as well. Obviously, her sentiment had changed sometime during the past 4 years, and she just didn't bother to tell me. Jumping ahead to the day before yesterday, I got another call from my girlfriend's mother. This time she asked if I'd be willing to meet with her daughter to let her explain what occurred and to give her some sort of closure. I told her I wouldn't meet with her, but out of respect, I would be willing to have a call with her, provided I could record the conversation. Again, that's smart. Don't get into a situation where you're alone with the person who cheated on you because you don't know what she's going to do in that situation. And if you're going to have a conversation with her, always record it. Get their approval to do so first, and if they refuse, just say, okay, I'm not going to meet with you, we're not going to speak. That's how you need to handle those kind of situations. She thanked me and said she would have her call me. Keep in mind, since the day I broke up with my ex, she's not once tried to call me or text me. When I mentioned this to her mother, She told me she believes her daughter has had a mental breakdown. She said she's not been back to work since our breakup and hasn't been leaving her apartment. Several hours passed and I eventually went to bed. At a little past midnight, after I had just fallen asleep, I got a call from my ex. I groggily answered and said hello. She said hi, and I stayed silent. After about 30 seconds of dead air, I asked her why she called. She spoke up and said she just wanted to tell me she was sorry. I said, okay, I forgive you. She again went silent, likely being surprised by my response and not knowing what to say in return. Yeah, because she really probably expected that you were going to give her a peace of mind, and what you did there was very smart because you totally deflated the situation. You say, okay, I forgive you, I'm moving on, and that's it. I asked if there was anything else, and she said she wanted to explain what happened that night, so I have a better understanding of the situation. I told her that was not necessary as the video told me everything I needed to know. After I said this, she started crying and told me I didn't have the full story. She said she knows the situation looked really bad, but she could explain what happened. You know what, if I was him, I would let her explain this because I'd like to hear how she could try to explain herself out of that one. Now, unless she was going to tell me that was her evil twin in the video, there was no way she was getting out of this, and I let her know that. I also told her there were no degrees to infidelity that were acceptable to me. And unless she tells me she was forced to do what I saw her doing, her explanation wasn't going to change anything. Before she could answer, I told her from what I saw in the video, she wasn't forced to do anything. From all appearances, it looked like she was the one who was driving the encounter. After I said this, she blurted out that it was a stupid lapse in judgment, and she is so sorry. She said it happened because they were both drunk. When all else fails, they blame it on the alcohol. While what she said was completely ridiculous, it was partially true. The guy in the video was drunk off his feet, but she definitely wasn't. He was slurring his words and lost his balance several times throughout the video, while she appeared to be in full control of her faculty. I pointed this out to her, and she insisted that wasn't true. She said she was drunk and had a terrible hangover the next day. By this time, I started to get agitated, so before I blew up, I told her I had heard enough and ended the call. She tried calling me back multiple times, but I didn't answer. A couple hours later, after I had finally fallen back to sleep, I heard a key in my lock, followed by the sound of light knocking on my door. I had the internal deadbolt set so the door wouldn't open from the outside. I knew it was her before I even got up to look. When I did, I saw her standing there wearing a parka, despite it being 80 degrees outside. I didn't answer, and she stayed out there knocking for a good 15 minutes before walking back to her car. While I was thoroughly disgusted with her, I still had concern for her well-being, as it was now after 3 a.m. and she was obviously in no condition to be driving. I decided to call her parents to let them know where she was. They arrived about 30 minutes later, and my ex's dad drove her car away while she rode off with her mother. After this, I wasn't able to get back to sleep. Later that day, as I was walking to my apartment for lunch, I spotted her car parked out in front of my unit. Not wanting to get into a confrontation, I turned around before she saw me. While walking back to my office, I called her mother to let her know where she was. Her mother apologized and said she would call her and have her leave. That evening, I went out to dinner and bowling with friends. I didn't get home until after 9 and was totally exhausted from a lack of sleep and went straight to bed. At around 2 a.m., I was again awoken by the sound of knocking on my door. It was her again, this time wearing a white bathrobe. Rather than call her parents, I decided to call my ex on her cell. She begged me to let her in as she wanted to talk to me in person. I told her we've already cleared the air and I had forgiven her, so there was nothing more to say. She told me she wasn't going to give up trying and she was going to come to my door every night until I let her in. So she's definitely now acting very crazy. I told her if she didn't leave, I was going to call her parents, and if she still refused, I would be forced to call the police. Well, that's what you should do. She cried and asked me why I refused to face her. I said because there was nothing more she could say that would undo what she had done. She again started crying, but this time did so at a volume that could be heard by my neighbors. I called her parents and told them she was back outside my door and causing a disturbance. I told them I didn't want to continue bothering them, but if I didn't call them, I would be forced to call the police. They asked me not to do that and requested I just keep calling them if she shows up. I said I would, but told them I don't know how much more of this I can take. They told me they would handle it. They once again came over and drove her away just as they did the previous night. The following day at work, I happened to look out the window around 11 and saw my ex drive up and park in a visitor parking spot. She got out and walked up to the front door, then walked back and got in her car. I didn't want her causing a scene for me, so I called her mom, but she didn't answer. I then tried her dad on his cell, and he answered. I could tell by his tone he was frustrated I was calling again. He apologized and said he'd take care of it and hung up. He apparently called her right after I spoke to him as she drove away just a few minutes later. This was now getting a little unsettling for me, as I didn't want her impacting my job or causing issues with my neighbors. Also, it was starting to affect my health as I hadn't gotten much sleep the past 2 nights. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for dinner. I stayed the night there as it was my grandpa's 80th birthday and we had a little party for him. We had a great time and I got a full night's sleep. The next morning, as I was driving to work, I got a call from my ex's dad. I could tell right away he was upset. He accusatorily asked me why I called the police last night instead of calling him. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about and asked him to explain. He said last night someone called the police on my ex at 3 a.m. when she was outside my apartment. I told him it wasn't me as I stayed at my parents' house last night. He apologized for his outburst, saying he just assumed it was me. Okay, here's what you do at this point with her father. You tell him, listen, this is the last time we're going to have a discussion about your daughter. The next time she shows up at my house or at my place of business, I am going to call the police and I'm going to file charges and then I'm going to get a temporary restraining order to keep her away from me. So you need to have that discussion with her and to straighten things out because I'm not calling you or her mother anymore. He went on to say the police didn't cite her but did put her through tests to ensure she wasn't under the influence. While I didn't say anything to her father, I'm really getting frustrated about this whole thing. I just want to be done with her without further incident while still being respectful to her parents. Does anyone have any suggestions on what I could do to resolve this? Yes, I just told you what to do. I feel the only outlet I have for doing so now is to engage the authorities, but I really don't want to do that as it would negatively impact her life and destroy my relationship with her parents. Help, he says. And that's the end of his original post. And now we're going to take a look at some of the responses he got back from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. That will help move this video up in the YouTube universe and get it seen by people across the planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one is from a woman. She says, I know you must feel betrayed and angry with your girlfriend, but I would encourage you to give her the closure she's asking for so that you both can go on with your lives. He's already moved on with his life. It's his girlfriend that's still trying to drag him back into the relationship that she destroyed. When I was 20, I had a single indiscretion with a guy while attending a party. My boyfriend found out and totally shut me out of his life. I've never fully recovered from that, even though it happened 9 years ago. He's moved on, but I'm still stuck living in the past, she says, crying. Next, here's a response from a guy. He says, I think you did the right thing by not meeting with her. You've got her on film performing an act, as you call it. How is she going to explain her way out of that? What you need to do is block her and her parents from everything and stop taking their calls. Amen. That's what you need to do. I know you said they're good people and you really like them, but when it comes right down to it, they are going to take their daughter's side no matter what she does. Bingo! What you have to remember with relationships is you don't have a relationship with her parents without her. Your relationship with her is over. Your relationship with them is over. Next up, we have another response from a woman. She says, from your description, it sounds like you had a great relationship before this happened. 4 years is a long time to be with someone to have it end so suddenly. Have you considered couples counseling? Or perhaps individual counseling first and then couples counseling? It makes me sad when I see young couples break up over stupid mistakes. Cheating is not a stupid mistake, it's a calculated decision. And even if it happened just one time, you had to plan for it. You had to put yourself in the situation to make it happen. And obviously she did that. So get out of here with that stupid mistake stuff. And finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, your only option at this point is to engage the police if she shows up again. I then suggest you file charges and obtain a temporary restraining order. I've unfortunately encountered too many situations like this in my line of work. I've seen plenty of times where a woman ends up flipping the script on the guy, accusing him of something in a last-ditch effort to hold on to him, or worse yet, causing him physical harm. Don't become a victim, and that's good advice from this guy here. That's a look at some of the responses he got, and now we're going to take a look at his final update, which came 53 days later, so a little over 7 weeks from his original post. He says, I'm back to give an update on the situation with me and my ex. I'd first like to thank those of you who responded to my original post. Your comments were both eye-opening and useful, and some were downright hilarious. I'll first start off and let you know that thankfully I've not had any further contact with my ex or her parents since my post. Now that's surprising because this is 53 days later and they've not been back in touch with him. I think her parents must have convinced her to stop pursuing me and focus on getting her life back on track. Since my first post, I've learned new information that is both baffling and mysterious. A few weeks after my last post, I got a call from the mutual friend who first introduced us. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in several months as she has been traveling a lot for work. She called me because she ran into my ex at the drugstore and she told her we had broken up. She called me to touch base and to see how I was doing. During our conversation, she let me know that my ex told her the guy she was with that night was a coworker at her company. While it doesn't make a difference, it was interesting to find out who the guy was, as up to this point I didn't know. The friend also let me know my ex was back to work and that the guy was no longer with the company. He was apparently let go for his actions, or I guess he could have resigned. Again, learning this was interesting, but it didn't matter anymore as I had moved on. The one thing that did concern me was my ex told her nothing was going to stop her from getting me back. Then last week, I received additional information from a surprising source. On Monday, I was contacted via Facebook by the wife of the guy in the video. She requested to speak to me as she had something important to tell me. I really didn't want to get involved, so I didn't respond for several days, but then she messaged me again stating it was urgent and she really needed to speak to me. When I called her at the number she provided, she proceeded to tell me that my girlfriend had an affair with her husband and she wanted me to know. I told her I already knew and that we were no longer together. She asked how I found out, and I told her I got a video sent to me anonymously showing them together. Turns out, so did she. She said she's been trying to find out who sent the video ever since. She feels strongly that it came from someone at the company, possibly an employee in HR or security who had access to the data on her husband's company-issued employee phone. She said at the company she works for, they back up all text, pictures, and videos from employee phones to the cloud, then scans them for possible code of conduct violations. Now, this is an important point this woman makes here because a lot of people don't realize this who have company-issued phones. I would never use a company phone to conduct personal business. especially things like videos and pictures and text, unless you're comfortable with having what you're doing be seen by your company. He goes on, he says, she said she believes this is how the video was discovered. She told me her husband was not only a cheater, but a total dumb F for using his company phone to record the video. Regardless of who sent the video to us, we are both very grateful for this person risking their job and a possible lawsuit by getting it to us. I'd love to find out who the person was, but likely never will. His wife told me after she found out, she kicked her husband out and is in the process of filing for divorce. She said even though she has a good job, she's going to take him for everything he has as they have a 9-year-old daughter. She also told me she is on a crusade to get my ex fired from her job and has threatened to sue the company for discrimination since they fired her husband from his manager's job. So her husband was a manager, and that's probably how they justified firing him and not her. She asked if I'd be willing to join her to get a little payback on my ex. I told her I wasn't interested, explaining I had moved on and wished my ex well. She understood, but told me she's not going to drop this, as she wants to do what's best for her and their daughter. She also let me know her attorney was looking into whether she could file a civil suit against my ex for breaking up their marriage. She said if our state law permits it, she will do so, explaining even if she doesn't get a penny, she wants to make her life miserable. So that's how things turned out. I thank God this ordeal is finally over and that I found out about my ex's true nature before we took our relationship to the next level. And that's the end of his story. And now I want to take a look at what I think are some of the morals of this story. The first one, establish cheating as a red line, never to be crossed. He obviously did that with his girlfriend in this case, and she should have known better. Next point, never cry or show weakness in front of anyone. I've said this on multiple videos. And this guy did a good job of controlling his emotions in front of people. But then when he was alone, he let loose and he would, I'm sure, scream and cry and do whatever. And that's perfectly fine. But don't do that in front of other people. Next, during a breakup, always put your well-being first. The one area where he did make a mistake is that initially there he was really looking out for his ex's, well-being and just thinking about her first and also thinking about her parents and then putting himself last. You don't do that. Next point, for your safety, notify the authorities in cases of unwanted contact. These kind of situations can spiral out of control very quickly, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Next point, for your safety, notify the authorities in cases of unwanted contact. These kind of situations can spiral out of control very quickly, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Next point, don't waste time trying to take revenge on an ex. They eventually will get what's coming to them. And this guy, I think, handled that appropriately when the AP's wife, wanted him to get involved to kind of drag his ex-girlfriend down, and he said, nah, I'm past that, I'm moving on. I think that was the right thing to do. And then finally, move on with your life and focus on your future. Don't get drugged back into an old relationship or dig up the past. Move forward and make yourself better. So those are some of my thoughts on this story. And overall, I think he handled the situation very well, all things considered. But now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled things differently? Would you have sat down with your girlfriend face to face if she cheated on you and hear her out to give her closure? Or would you have handled things like he did? Tell us about that in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you